Welcome to Coming Home, everyone. Survive and thrive in homeschooling. Everyone has a story to tell. Today, I'm delighted to welcome a dear friend, Jennifer, to my podcast. We're going to talk about a few things. We'll start with her homeschooling years and then what life has brought since then. Her husband has young onset dementia, and there's quite a story to hear. She's also going to tell us how this prepared her to become a life coach. But first, Jennifer, hello and welcome to you.
Thank you.
Why don't you start by telling us why you started to homeschool? What made you decide to do that?
Well, not for the usual reasons. Our story here was quite different. My parents ran a small grocery store in the town that I grew up in, and my dad became very unwell and he was told that he shouldn't return back to work. They couldn't just close up. That was their retirement income, that everything they had financially was hooked into selling that grocery store to retire. So my husband and I had this random thought that maybe we could go and run their grocery store for them and get it sold, and they could come and live in our house up in the city, and my brothers who lived there could support them. So from memory, my husband and I actually came to talk to you and your husband and say, are we totally crazy thinking about doing this? Because it was a major upheaval for us as a family. My children were at that time in a private Christian school that we were very happy with. My husband had a good job that he was very happy with. We just had this thought that it was a good thing to do, and it turned out so well for us. So we decided that we would do it. We offered that to my parents and discussed with my brothers first, actually, and then offered that to my parents and went and talked to the school and said, this is what we're going to do. We think we'll be gone for 6 months, 12 months maximum. Can we just continue with the curriculum from school, the maths and everything that you're doing, and then we can slot them right back in when we come back to the city? And so that's what we did. We moved my parents into our house. We went and lived in their house and ran the grocery store. And so I would homeschool the girls in the morning. At that time, we were using the curriculum from the school. And then in the afternoon, I would go and work in the office. And the house was right behind the shop. And they'd just come and go and play outside. And it was a really good thing. You know, we knew we were doing the right thing to support our parents, and my husband was in IT, and so he was still doing some of his work on the side as well. We'd travel away with him when he was working and take our homeschooling with us and get to explore museums and parks and walks and things while we were doing that. So that's how it started. And after 6 months, I said to my husband, I don't want to put them back in school. The changes in the whole family dynamics were just so big, and things just became so much better for us as a family that we realised that homeschooling was actually a better life for us that fitted in better with the way we wanted to be as parents.
What did you notice starting to happen, Jennifer?
I thought, as probably many parents do, that my girls would want to be watching TV all the time. Now, what was happening when they were at school was they were coming home exhausted, and they did want to watch a lot of TV. But when they weren't coming home from school exhausted, they just wanted to play and be creative. And I remember we'd been studying T.S. Eliot's poem about cats, and we'd been listening and watching the musical, and I popped home from the shop one afternoon just to check on them because they hadn't come down at all, and they were out in the garden being cats and just playing imaginative games. They were 6 and 8 at this time. Yes, just the creative play, the curiosity, it was just really so changing. And when we went away as a family, when my husband was working away, we just had so much fun exploring things, letting go of the books and just taking advantage of where we were. But, you know, even your holidays became an educational experience in quite a different way from when there was school.
So that's quite reassuring right from the outset, isn't it? Is
Yeah.
for parents who are interested in homeschooling is, oh, you know, what about the television? That's all they'll want to do. I'll have to be always fighting them. But your experience, not so. And I like the correlation you made there, that it was because they were so tired, that's all they wanted to do was sit in front of the TV. But children are naturally energetic.
Yes.
That's so
Yes.
encouraging. Thank you for that insight. Is there anything else you want to comment on of differences that surprised you or in transitioning from homeschooling from out of the school?
A couple of things. The first was that my oldest daughter was passing maths quite well at school. But I realised when I brought her home, she hadn't retained any of the information. You know, at school, the way they teach is you do 2 weeks of fractions or 2 weeks of geometry. And she was well able to pass the tests at the end of the 2 weeks. But that information, she just hadn't retained at all. And so I ended up taking her right back to the very basics and giving her a stronger foundation. She did say to me, oh, Ma, when we're doing maths at school, sometimes I'd spend the whole maths period holding my hand up waiting for the teacher to come because she was a quiet child. And so the teacher would go to the children who might cause trouble if they didn't get the attention. And my daughter would sit there quietly and just wait and wait and wait. And so it was just such a change just to be able to, for her to have one-on-one time for what she needed when she needed it. So that was quite a surprise for me. I really wasn't expecting that because her school reports and everything had shown that she was quite adequate in that area. And the other thing, the conversations, just the conversations we'd have around the dinner table and in the car, they changed quite dramatically.
So it sounds to me that you understood quite naturally, by the sounds of it, to take advantage of your settings wherever you were, or to use the world as your classroom, as I so often like to say, is that. So how would you describe then the curriculum? So we heard you say that you were using the school's curriculum for a while, and then you must have moved away from that. What did you move into?
Well, I actually am a trained teacher. I have a Bachelor of Education. And so I did a lot adopt the school at home approach, which is something that I would change now. I experimented with a lot of things. For maths, I cannot tell you how much money I spent and how many curriculums I tried because I love maths and I was looking for the perfect fix. Oh my gosh, if I had my time again, I would save myself a lot of money and a lot of frustration and probably frustration for my daughters too. And just have stuck with one thing and seen it through rather than experimenting with all the, oh my gosh, some homeschoolers are using this and they rave about it. Maybe I should try that. So yeah, I did stay quite structured. So I was using the learning language arts through literature, which is based on good classic books, but was dead boring, a lot of it for the girls. And I really shouldn't have persisted with that. I did eventually let go of a lot of the grammar things because in America they do teach grammar a lot more in depth than what we do here. And it was just too much, really, I think, in hindsight. Once they got a little bit older, we were using Apology of Science, which I loved because that's all based on biblical values. And we did use, I can't remember the name, the curriculum was Ancient Civilizations in the Bible, and it was by Diane someone.
Waring.
Yes.
Yes.
Loved that. Absolutely loved that curriculum. I learned so much, and it was so interesting going back to all the different legends and things from all the different cultures all around the world and seeing the commonalities between that. And so, yeah, exploring some of that was really, really great. we later on did a writing curriculum, and I've been trying to remember, it totally escapes me, but there was a man who taught, an American man, and he taught a way of writing so that you use certain structure, but how to make things really interesting in the way you wrote. The main thing I remember was there was a thing called a very short sentence and using a very short sentence and the impact of doing that. But the interesting thing about that is when my eldest daughter went off to university to study music, she had to have an interview before she was accepted because we had no qualifications, nothing formal. And their one main concern with taking her into university was that she wouldn't know how to write an essay. Now, she was very confident in that because of this curriculum that we'd used, and we'd done a lot of writing. It ended up that she was helping fellow students who'd come through public school to write essays.
No surprises.
Quite wonderful. Quite wonderful, yeah.
I'm just thinking that writing curriculum, was that Andrew Padiwa?
Yes, that's it.
Yes.
That's it. It was very, very valuable. It served us very well.
Just as an aside, Jennifer, I was just listening to you how you enjoyed so much especially the ancient civilization curriculum, and then the writing instruction through Andrew's course. Did you find that it was helpful to you in your later years with what you were learning, especially with the writing skills?
Oh, definitely. Yes, it was. I was learning too. You know, the apology of science, I was lapping it up because it was just taking things from such a different perspective than what I was taught in high school and when I was at Teachers College. Because I took science as a speciality when I was at Teachers College, and it was from a totally different worldview. So I was just lapping up what I was learning and, you know, really looking at both sides of the global warming debate, for example, and going, whoa, what I'm hearing is not what you see when you really look into things at a deeper level. Yeah.
Interesting, isn't it, that the curriculum book you're working out of there was teaching you how to think and assess facts for yourself, if you're taking, say, both aspects of your example, the global warming, rather than just the package we tend to get through the media. You're looking at some conflict, what would seem conflicting things. So what do you actually do with that? And now you're learning how, and your children are learning how to assess that information.
Yes.
That's a really good observation. And again, another encouraging thing for homeschooling parents who are considering this journey, or they've got young ones and they're wondering what some of the positives will be out of homeschooling. The other thing you mentioned there that I'll just stop on as a means of encouragement was you said you enjoyed the learning so much. That was something that took me by surprise with the homeschooling. Nobody told me about that. I thought it was all for my children's sake, but I'm a changed woman now.
Yes.
I would not be what I am today without the exposure and the opportunities and the books and what I learned.
Yes. And I have another story about my second daughter when she went away to tertiary study, and she was also doing a Bachelor in Music, but she went to a polytech, the local polytech instead. And for a whole series of reasons, we stopped homeschooling her at the age of 16. We'd lost both of her grandmothers within a year of each other. And the second one was my mum, and we were both grieving, and we just actually weren't in a place where we just felt we wanted to pick up homeschooling again after, quite a difficult time. So I managed to convince the local polytech to consider her for their foundation music course. And they said, no, we don't take 16-year-old, we don't take school dropouts. That's not what this course is designed for. So I very carefully explained, what had happened with her losing both of her grandmothers and how we just needed to do something quite different. And this course looked ideal. And so they did interview her, and she went in as a drummer. So, she had to do some drumming and that just to show the level that she was at. And she was accepted onto this foundation music course with a lot of adults on the course. And sometimes the students would be talking and saying, oh, I don't understand what we need to do here, or I don't get this. And she, at the age of 16, would be the one to say, I'll go and ask, because she was so confident with speaking to adults.
And you're correlating that with her homeschooling experience, that's where she got it from?
Because she wasn't sitting in a classroom with peers of her own age. She was interacting with people of all ages when we went on homeschool trips.
But I thought socialization was a big problem for homeschoolers, Jennifer.
Definitely not. I mean, we had a wonderful homeschool community where I lived. When we went on a school trip, the dads would often take days off work and come with us as well. I mean, it was just such a joy to watch all the children interacting with the younger children, with the older children, with the adults who were there. And we were very involved in the church at that time as well. And so again there, she was playing music in the church with the adults, and she was very, very confident with relating to adults.
It's one of those unexpected outcomes. Well, actually, not so much unexpected these days. I think that homeschooling has had such a good collection of history now and data, if you like, is that is a commonality.
Yes.
That you can virtually count on. All right, then. Now, when you went down to your smaller town in New Zealand and you started to move out of this is just 6 months, and now you're looking at this for a longer period. When you and your husband sat down to talk about this, what did you decide was important to you both? You've got the academics, obviously, but what else did you decide? We want to make sure we expose our girls to this. We want to teach them about that. Did you have a little list or a big list?
Very little list. Actually, we were very much adherents of the idea that if you train a child in the way they should go, I will show you the man. And that's why they'd been in a private Christian school prior to our homeschooling. So we had made a deliberate decision when they were very young, toddlers, that we weren't going to put them in a public school. We were troubled even at that time with some of the things that we were seeing and hearing about. So that was a very deliberate decision of ours. So that really came forefront in a lot of the decisions we made. But it was about, spending time together as a family and learning together as a family and having good conversations together as a family, and not really a lot more than that. Letting them explore their passions. And they both did go on and complete a Bachelor of Music degree, which is something that had they been at school, they might not have explored in the same way.
So when it came to maybe some skills that you wanted your girls to learn that would be handy to know when they were adults, but they aren't necessarily found in a book, like how to budget, for instance, or choosing nutritional food and preparing it, or, even, making clothes or gardening. Was there anything like that was just naturally part of your life, or things that you chose to bring in so they would learn?
No, and I would change a lot. If I had my time back again, I would get them in the kitchen a lot more. But for me, I just felt like I was better to be in the kitchen on my own and get done what needed to be done. I don't enjoy cooking. So spending time teaching them to cook wasn't something I really particularly enjoyed. We did things though. I mean, whatever we were studying, we'd have family, we'd have a French night or an Italian night or a Mexican night, depending on what part of the world or what culture we were studying at that time. So we did have fun creating menus and cooking those. At the time, I wasn't really gardening. I'd put all my crafts aside. We had a lot else going on in our life as well as homeschooling. And I'd definitely change things if I had my time again.
But do we ever end up actually teaching them everything? I think hindsight is always clear.
It is.
and I think the other thing I've noticed too, Jennifer, is that when you've made the decision not to delegate and you take responsibility pretty much for everything, I think you're a lot more aware more often of what we didn't do as opposed to what we did do well.
Yes.
But what we did do well was that we taught them how to think, how to study themselves, so that if they wanted to become a culinary whiz, they can actually do that because they know what it's like to go and learn something. And I do wonder if, we can focus too much on what we think we haven't done.
Good point. My eldest has turned into a very, very good cook, far better than me.
Well, there you
And
go.
she enjoys it.
You've already alluded to some things that you would change. Is there anything that you would tell your younger self? Let's say you had this amazing, you could time travel. What would you go back and tell your just starting out young homeschool mum? What would you tell her?
Not focus on getting the bookwork done quite as much, that it didn't matter as much as I thought. And that was the trained teacher in me. And particularly when they came to high school, when we decided to continue into the high school years, because that was another decision you make. We decided to homeschool for where they were at when they were 6 and 8 and to continue that. But it was another whole decision process. Do we continue when it came to the high school years? And so then that's when I sourced some of the other curriculum, the writing curriculum and the apology of science and that, to make sure that we were meeting an academic level for their high school years. What else would I tell myself? Yeah, just to enjoy it more and not to double guess myself so much, and definitely not to spend as much money. You don't need to buy a lot of expensive curriculum.
That's so true. When you moved from going into their high school years, well, first of all, did you think that you would be doing that when you started?
We hadn't really thought that far ahead. It was a little bit more, let's see where we get to. And by that time we had my parents had sold the store. We'd actually moved location. So we were in a totally different location. And the homeschooling community we were in, some people were putting their children back in school, but mostly not. So that was quite an encouragement to see the older children in the homeschooling community and what they were like and what they were doing, and being able to talk to them and their parents was really, really helpful. So no, I don't think initially we did plan that it would necessarily go all the way through, but that's definitely what we did. We took them both right through to tertiary education.
Mm. All right. So have you got any tips to make homeschooling life smoother? And I should just explain to listeners, Jennifer was my organised friend. I'm not a naturally organised person. So I used to just watch some of the ways you just ran things and would just pick up a few tips here and there. So can you is there anything that you think is really good to know about to just make life go a little bit more smoothly?
We did have a set time to start every day. So the girls knew that 9 o'clock we were sitting down to do our schooling, our bookwork, and we sat around the dining room table together. Mostly as they got older, they'd often take work off somewhere else and then come back. But one of the things that worked really, really well for us was I had an exercise book, and I would write in that exercise book my expectations for the week. So for maths, they would do pages blah, blah, blah. For apology of science, they would do this chapter, or maybe it might be the assessment at the end. And I would write down for all the things we were doing what my expectations were for the week. When it was done, it was done. So mostly we had Fridays off. And it was great encouragement for them to know that when it was done, it was done. I wasn't going to put anything extra in there. And they could crack on and they could work longer on a Monday, Tuesday, whatever, and get it done. So we enjoyed our Fridays off. They felt like they'd worked hard, and they usually had. And I was quite happy to let Fridays go.
That's a wonderful gem to pop in there for folk. Yeah. Let's move on from homeschooling to life after homeschooling. And as I mentioned at the top of the podcast, you've got quite a story to tell with young onset dementia. So I'm not going to say any more about that because you're the one with the story to tell. Just tell us what happened.
We were coming up to my husband's 60th birthday. We were going overseas to Ireland to visit his family in Ireland for that birthday. And I just started noticing some things that just weren't quite right. His driving habits had changed a little bit and actually did cause a lot of tension because he thought he was a very good driver and didn't like me becoming a front seat driver. But I felt that some of his driving habits were becoming a little bit dangerous. And he was very often just stopping in the middle of a sentence and losing a word and saying, "What's the word I want?" And I'd say, "Well, I don't know." You're telling the story. I do tell the story this particular Christmas and New Year, just before we went overseas. We'd had a very busy family Christmas. We'd gone away. We had all exchanged gifts, and Paul actually hadn't given me a gift, which was most unlike him. He was a gift giver. That was his love language. But we were just so busy. I didn't really even think about it. We went away for New Year, as we always did. It was our wedding anniversary, so we'd just always go away on our own. And we were driving in the car, and he said to me, "You didn't thank me for your Christmas present." And I said, "But Hans, you didn't give me a Christmas present." And he said, "Oh, yes, I did." And I said, "No, honey, you didn't." And he was just absolutely sure that he had. When we did get home from that holiday, it was still sitting in his drawer. So he hadn't packed it to go away for Christmas. We'd come back, spent a couple of days at home, repacked, and he still hadn't noticed that it was still sitting in the drawer. And it was just strange. That same drive we were on, about 5 minutes later, I said to him, "Where are you going?" "We're heading towards Featherston, and I thought we were going to Masterton." And he said, "Oh, yes, we are going to Masterton." And I said, "But this isn't the right way." And he said, "Oh, no, I wanted to go this way." And I said, "Oh, the other way is just so much prettier. I'd rather have gone the other way." And he said, "Oh, well, we'll come back that way." And again, driving in directions was just his thing. We'd lived in London for 2 years. He always knew where he was going. And he'd always be like, "Oh, the roads are a bit clogged up. I'm just going to dive off in this direction and go in another direction." And it really troubled me quite a lot that the gift-giving, very able to take directions husband, within that space, that tiny space of time with those two conversations, it was very, very concerning for me. So then probably the trip overseas was a real crux time for us. I mean, we had a wonderful time and I'm so grateful for it. We did a river cruise on the Danube, and that was the last good holiday we had together, because really by the time we came home, I knew there was something seriously, seriously wrong with him. It took us 2 years to get a diagnosis of dementia because he was only 60. And so the doctors will very typically write it off as stress. And I had to sit in the doctor's office with him and say, "It's not stress. I know my husband so well. It's not stress. We have to have a brain scan." And he didn't want to refer us for a brain scan. And I was actually given a form that I had to fill out in front of my husband. It was awful, just rating all these areas. Was he the same or better or worse than a year ago? And I was ticking, worse, worse, worse. His driving was worse. His language was worse. His processing was worse. Yeah, everything was just worse. And the doctor looked at it and looked at me and said, "Okay, well, we will refer you for a CT scan." But that came back clear because it wasn't detailed enough. And it actually came back clear. So then I joyfully accepted the diagnosis of stress. It was such a relief. And we exited him from work and organised some counselling, and he was just taking some time out to de-stress. But then the COVID lockdowns happened, and I was suddenly home all day, every day with him. And I knew then that it was probably dementia. The changes were just so dramatic. And the type of dementia he has is frontal temporal dementia, which affects your language, your communicating, your processing part of your brain. And he went from being a very, very capable IT project manager, managing million-dollar projects, for government departments, multi-million-dollar projects, and, managing a team of people, to someone who couldn't even complete a sentence. It was just devastating.
Nobody expects this kind of thing to happen, do they, Jennifer?
Not even an inkling. We were very ill prepared.
Well, do you think then that couples should contemplate possibilities like this? And if so, how could you prepare for something that you don't even know is going to happen, obviously? Well, I mean, would you consider advising that we should all be preparing for possibilities like that or not? What would you say?
Yes, I think yes. Because it's not just, this was a serious terminal medical condition. It is terminal. We were told when we got the diagnosis from the neurologist, the average life expectancy from now would be 6 years, which means we have very few left, very, very few. But it's not necessarily just something like that can turn your life upside down. COVID showed that, and the lockdown showed that, just how dramatically everybody's lives changed almost overnight. And, people were losing their jobs, the current economic situation, people are losing their jobs. You just don't know what's ahead. And we could have had our mortgage paid off. But Paul loved his job. He loved people. He loved his job. There was someone in his team who was in their 70s working 4 days a week. And that was what he wanted to do. He said, why would I leave my job? I love my job. We thought that he had probably 10 more years of earning to go. And I thought that I would have had 5 more years of earning to go. And we were smashing out the mortgage, but not thinking that we needed to have it done like tomorrow. And all of a sudden, his income, which was 2/3 of our income, was gone permanently. No hope of ever having any more. And within 2 years, I also had to choose to leave work to be at home full time as his condition deteriorated. So I also left work quite early. And that can happen for all sorts of different reasons. So yes, in hindsight, I would say to people, make sure you've got a will. Definitely make sure you've got enduring power of attorney signed. So that if something happens to you medically and you can't make decisions for any reason, someone has that in place. Otherwise, you have to go to court. And if you have to go to court to get an enduring power of attorney, or it's not enduring, if you have to go to court to get a power of attorney assigned, that has to be renewed every 2 years. You have to keep exceptionally good records of all the money you're spending and everything you're doing on behalf of that person. It's a lot more onerous than what I have to do, because partly we've got joint accounts, so it hasn't changed a lot. But everybody needs to have those, because things can happen in an instant where all of a sudden you can't make your own decisions. I also learned about advanced care planning. I'd never heard of it. And we were actually given all the forms for that too late for me to be able to go through that with my husband, because he couldn't communicate anymore. But that's really deciding on things like your end-of-life decisions. What would you like for your funeral? If you did have to go into a rest home, what would be some things that you would desire? When it comes to your end of life, what would be your decisions making about resuscitation, about taking antibiotics, about taking vaccinations, all that kind of thing? I think I know what Paul would have wanted, but a lot of it's guesswork. And so that's actually quite a valuable document that I don't think most people know about. And it seems strange to think about it. I haven't done mine yet. That's on my list to do before the end of this year, because it's been just so difficult supporting Paul in this journey that I haven't put that documentation in place for me. But it's good for people to know about those things. You actually can get all that kind of thing down in writing that your will doesn't cover. And in hindsight, there's some really good financial advisors out there at the moment. People who show you how to get your mortgage paid off and not go along with the traditional way of your bank gives you a 25-year mortgage and you just keep paying it off. And we had put a couple of those steps in place to get our mortgage paid off early. But I think now I'd actually go and get professional advice and get a set plan in place to be looking after our finances, because financially this has been an absolute disaster for us.
Especially if you have assumed that you have X amount of years of financial income. Nobody talks about this kind of thing in life. When disasters kind of happen, it just, everybody goes all quiet and we don't talk about this kind of thing, you know. And I think it's done us all quite a disservice.
Yes.
Because you're living that disservice, and we're looking at you and Paul and going, oh my goodness, what should we be putting into place now? So I can only urge listeners to take it seriously, that we don't want to look at a worst case scenario.
No.
But some of us are going to get it.
Yes, they are. And there's so much that I've learned. Like, if you've got a bank account just in your own name, that can be really difficult to administer. If you get a power of attorney appointed through the courts, you have to physically go to the bank every time you want to do something. You can't just bank online. You have to go to the bank and do it. It's crazy. And so just things like, if you've got someone else's name on your bank account, they can just manage things for you. So there's just some things like that. Obviously, it has to be someone you can trust, but a lot of couples have that in place. But how about doing it for your parent or your daughter or someone as well?
Have you got anything else to advise then on preparing for potential scenarios?
We had a lot of heartache in our lives. Paul lost two brothers and a brother-in-law who were all in their 20s at the time. And it was just absolutely, totally shocking, of course, to have all that happen. They were three young men with a lot of lives to live, and they were gone in an instant, literally, in two of the cases. And so we said then, no regrets. We don't know when our days are going to be done. No regrets. And that's why we have travelled and we have done a lot of things that we wanted to do. And we have created a lot of memories because we knew not to wait till our retirement. Thank goodness. Paul doesn't get one.
Oh, yeah. That's a strong message, actually. Don't keep putting things off, assuming.
Yeah, if we'd waited to do our travel when we'd retired, we wouldn't have had it.
All right. For family and friends that surround you who also have shocking news to absorb, how would you advise people who don't know what to do or what to say? Just tell us what to do.
I think people very, very freely say, let me know what I can do to help. That then puts the burden back on the person who's struggling, and you don't ask. You can't even process most of the time what people could do to help. So one thing that I do advise now, and for people who are dealing with dementia, but it would be relevant to a lot of other things as well, is actually write down a list of what would help you. Would you like someone to come and take your husband out for a walk? Would you like someone to take you out for a coffee? Would you like some help with the gardening? That's something that I really struggled. I had to pick up everything that Paul used to do as well as everything that I used to do. Would you like a meal dropped in or some baking dropped in? Would you like people to come for a coffee and spend time with you or with your husband? Write those things down, and then when someone says, let me know what I can do to help, you actually give them your list and say, these are things that would help me. If there's anything on there that feels comfortable for you to do, I would really appreciate it. Then you're not carrying that mental load. If someone said, oh, well, let me know how I can help, you never get back to them, ever. I don't think I did once, because you're in turmoil. You're just living in total stress and overwhelm. So that's one thing I do suggest, is pre-think it. Or after it's happened to you the first time, think about what would be helpful, because some things are and some things aren't. And what those of us in the dementia community find, unfortunately, is that people stay away when it's dementia. It's not talked about. It's not well known about. And people stay away because they're uncomfortable and they don't know what to say and what to do. And, you know, if a family, if someone's got cancer, and I've experienced this with my mum and with my mother-in-law, people gather around. People come, they visit, they bring the baking, they bring the meals, people gather around. With dementia, it's almost like they stay away because of their level of discomfort. And it's very, very lonely. And I think we would all say that. So be there physically if you can. I mean, one of my best supporters is my dear, dear brother. And I'm so grateful to him. And he can't be here physically. He lives on a livestock block. He's got animals. He doesn't live locally. He can't be here physically. But there is not a week that he doesn't text me a couple of times. Hey, how are things going? Or offer a phone call. Do you want to call this week? I mean, I was in tears on the phone to him just a couple of days ago. And he's like, okay, you've got a good plan for tomorrow. I'll message you and we'll talk again tomorrow night if you need to. He has talked me down off the cliff so many times. And he's not physically present, but I know that he's available. And honestly, that's just gold. Absolute gold.
Okay, what, excuse me, that's a few hints of what we can do. What should we definitely not do?
Go AWOL. There are very few people who have stayed around to visit and support. The people who are absolute gold. But so many people, you know, everybody lives busy lives. Everybody does. Everybody has something going on in their lives. And it's very easy to forget. Very easy to forget. And I don't think people understand the level of grief that goes with dementia. In fact, I'm going to read you a quote.
Please do.
I quote this often when I'm speaking. It's about ambiguous grief. I don't know. Have you heard of the term ambiguous grief? No. So this is a quote from a book by Dr. Pauline Voss. Dementia is a prime example of ambiguous or unclear loss. Making sense of it is especially difficult because a loved one is simultaneously here and gone. It's as though there's a stranger in the house. The relationship you once had is thus deeply altered. Without clarity or clear finality, you're held in limbo, blocked from grieving and making sense of it all. Because of the incongruence between absence and presence, ambiguous loss is the most stressful kind of loss. Clients tell me that even a death in the family would be less painful because there's certainty in death. That's what I'm living, Christine.
Yeah.
It's just so big.
Yeah. Yes, indeed. All right. Well, that is extremely, oh gosh, it sounds so twee to say good advice. Thank you for your good advice, Jennifer. I mean, where do I find the right words for that? So it's been so important to hear that, because I know it's more than I think. I know we can use our busyness as the reason why we choose not to get involved or visit or catch up or something, and because it's so easy to tell ourselves that lie that, oh, well, I'm just much too busy. I've got a busy life too. Yes, we have, but especially from a faith perspective, a faith in God perspective. Do you want to touch on anything in that, Jennifer, or do you want to move on?
I think what I will say, not related to faith in God, but I think what I will say is if my husband had died 2 years ago, when it came to the stage where I had to make the most awful decision in my life and put him into a care facility, a dementia care facility with locked doors, because if he'd wandered out, he was still very, very physically fit, but he wouldn't be able to find his way back. When I did that, I came home that night and I had the level of grief as being a widow because he was now permanently removed from the house. And that was a huge decision to make, but I felt like a widow and my grief was just horrendous. But people don't gather around you like if he'd passed. And, again, it's like just be there. It doesn't need to be physically. It can be a message. It can be a phone call. But I couldn't express how I was feeling to more than one or two people because I really felt that people didn't want to know. It was uncomfortable for them.
Yes.
And I do say, what about me?
Well, it's actually an incredibly selfish thing. Let me just put the say on myself, is that if I'm now more worried about, but what will I say? Will I feel uncomfortable? Will I feel threatened? That's suddenly about me. It's not about me. This is about you and Paul. I mean, how selfish is that? And I'm Christian. How does that work in the light of a faith in God that's always teaching us to serve other people? And if that is something that resonates with listeners, then I can only encourage you just to look at that a bit more, because we are by nature selfish creatures. We're fallen humans and we constantly have to reassess that. And there are situations, say like yours and Paul's, that we actually don't have a choice but to have to confront that.
I think, it's very easy to be a Christian in today's world.
What do you mean?
We don't have to go outside of our comfort zone to go to church and to do good things. This is really outside of people's comfort zone, dealing with something like this. This is big. I mean, I've lived outside my comfort zone for 5 years now because I have no choice. And it's been good for me and it's made me a better person. And I'm a very, very different person than I was 5 years ago. But yeah, I think it is very easy to live inside your comfort zone and go to church and be a Christian. I did for many, many years.
I have got something I would say to Christian folk. You will know that my youngest brother is autistic, and please don't tell people who have a situation like yours or ours that somehow this must be God's will in your life. Very early on, when my brother was quite young, we had a lovely church lady send us a card that had something of the message in there that said that a very special baby was going to be born and the angels went to and fro looking for the right family because this child was going to need extra special care, blah, blah, blah. And they chose your family.
Whoa.
I can't think of many times when I've been more angry. She meant well. She really, really did. But that was a horrible thing to put on a family. What does it say about God? Would God really choose to visit Paul and you with this in your life? And I tell you what, if somebody could, well, not that they could ever prove it to me because that would be total anathema to me, but God's not like that. Why would he do that? It's not him. So that would be a very simple piece of advice. Please don't tell people who have situations like this that this is God's will in their life.
Yeah. And, you go through all the stages of grief. The thing with ambiguous grief is you go through them many, many, many times because, there was the grief when he couldn't communicate with me anymore. Then there was the grief when we couldn't go on holiday anymore. Then there was the grief when he couldn't put his shoes on anymore. Then there's the grief when I had to decide to put him into care. And then there was the grief when he went from level 3 dementia care to level 5 high dependency care because he needed more support. Then there's the grief where he couldn't get in the car anymore, so I couldn't take him out for drives. And now we've just recently had him assessed as he's no longer independently mobile. And so that means he's sitting in a lazy boy chair all day, every day. If he does try and stand up, it takes 2 of us, 1 on either side to steady him and 2 of us to walk with him. But basically, he's not mobile any longer. And all of those have a stage of grief, and you just go through these huge cycles of grief again and again and again. And anger is part of that grief cycle. And I have been angry. I've been angry with the world. I've been angry with God. I have gone through that anger because, well, you know, Paul, he's the kindest, most selfless man. He's just the most amazing husband. And I'm just so grateful that I've lived my life with him. And, you know, when I'm in the angry state, I haven't railed against God about it, but I do go, there's so many bad, horrible people in this world. Why would it happen to my man? Mm-hmm. How could it happen to my man? It's just not fair. And my reality is that when I visit him, he's with people in their 70s, 80s, and even 90s. There's a couple of ladies. There's only 14 in his unit, but a couple of the ladies are in their 90s. And he's just turned 65. And, you know, we do feel cheated and robbed because I did want to have a lot more really good years with him. And yeah, if anybody said to me, oh, this was part of God's plan, yeah, I'd lose it.
As you should. Well, I know that this has led you into life coaching, and I don't think that you would be able to do it in the manner that you are without having to have gone through what you have done. So can you please tell us a little bit about how it led you into life coaching now and what your experiences, I think, have made you very good at in the life coaching. Does that make sense?
I think I was a reasonably resilient person. You don't pull your children out of school and homeschool and make some of the decisions that I've made in my life without being reasonably resilient and having a bit of a backbone. But I wasn't resilient for this. Like, I just expected to live the rest of my life with Paul. We thought we had many, many good years and adventures ahead of us. And so the first year, I do regret it now, but I was just living in overwhelm and stress and grief. And I cried for a year. And I literally cried. Someone would come into my office to ask for something, and I would just burst into tears because my cup was already full. I couldn't take one more thing. I'd cry in the car on the way home from work because I didn't walk into the reality of the situation that I was coming home to my husband with dementia, and he'd been bored all day, home a lot alone. We do live in a multi-generational house, which has just been a total blessing. So my daughter and 3 grandchildren live downstairs. So he had someone keeping an eye on him. But I didn't want to come back and walk into that house. I was a mess. I was a total mess. I tried counselling. For me, that made it worse because I didn't need to be talking through all the stuff. I actually just needed to know how to survive. And perhaps if I'd been able to explain that to the counsellor or counsellors, there were a couple, that they may have been able to provide that for me, but they couldn't. They didn't. And so really what I just needed to know was, how can I get through tomorrow and the next day and the next day? This is a terminal condition. It only gets worse. I think that's one of the hardest things for me, has been that there's no hope. Once you get that diagnosis, hope is gone. So I'd been living like this for a year. Paul had been out of work for a year. And I had a friend that I'd connected with in Canada. And a lot of things had gone online because of COVID. So this friend said to me, look, I work with this lady. She's a life coach. She's running a free 5-day self-image boot camp. I think you'd get something out of it. And I'm going, self-image boot camp? You know, I'm not a self-image person. I don't wear a lot of makeup. I don't dress smartly. And that's not what I'm about. But hey, it's 6:00 in the morning because it was on Canadian time and I could do that and then still get to work on time. So let's see what it's about. And that week was life-changing for me because it made me think about some things that I hadn't had the space to think about because I wasn't getting the help and support that I needed. And it was all based on being asked questions and looking at the answers to the questions for me, personalized. What for me would be a good outcome for me in a year's time? I couldn't change the circumstances of my husband's dementia, but I could change some things for me. And so I went for the first time in my life during that week to the nail salon, had my fingernails done. I've always kind of wanted to do it. And I never had. And I thought, you know what? I'm just going to do it. And then I recorded myself live. And if you know me well, that's just not me either, saying what I would like to be doing in a year's time and posting that up in the group. And I just had a glimmer of hope that actually my life didn't have to be ruined totally because of what was going on. Yes, everything was flipped upside down. I wasn't going to have a retirement with my husband. Financially, we were not in a very good state. Everything was going to have to be focused around him and, you know, increasingly me becoming a caregiver, which I didn't want to be at all. But I had this glimmer, this just tiny little glimmer. And so when I got the free call at the end of the week, which I didn't actually want to take, I didn't want to have a conversation with her, but I knew sort of deep down I needed to. And I ended up signing up for a year's program with her coaching. And so it's a group program, and we have Monday night in Canada, it's Tuesday afternoon for us in New Zealand, where we as a group get together. But there's also individualized planning and things. But she asks questions that really get you thinking. And it took me a whole year before I could write a goal. And it was a tiny goal. I look back on it now and laugh. But it took me a whole year before I could even write a goal because I just couldn't see what was going to be the future for me. But I re-signed up for another year. And in my third year, that was when she helped me through making the decision to put Paul in care. And all she does is ask some really good questions. And I knew at the end of that half-hour call what the answer needed to be because of the way the questions were framed. I knew that it was the time that I had to do that. And so then when he went into care, I'm like, what am I going to do? I couldn't go back to work. I was still emotionally, physically, mentally exhausted. But I wrote a course. I wrote a course for women whose husbands have got dementia with the 8 strategies that she had taught me, a wonderful nurse practitioner had helped with one, and a counsellor that Paul had at one stage had helped me with one. But basically 8 strategies to flourish. And that was really cathartic for me, was actually doing that and going, these things have helped me so much. They've helped me change my life. And then the next year, my daughter, she decided to become a life coach. She'd also ended up joining up with this lady. So we sit here together and share the computer screen on the calls, which is really fun. And she started a journey too, because the thing is, she's lost both of her grandmothers when she was quite young. She would have been 16 and 17 when she lost both of her grandmothers. She's now going through all this grief with her father as well, and it's huge because she was living in the house and seeing it on a daily basis. And she decided to become a life coach as well. And so she did a course, and then when the next course was running, I'm like, I'm going to do this too, because I know how much having a life coach has changed my life, that I really want to be able to do this for other women. And it's not mentoring, it's not giving advice, it's asking really powerful questions so that people can really tap into what they want and who they want to be. And the coaching community has now become just an amazingly supportive community for me, because as part of it, we have peer coaching. And so I can just message someone and say, hey, you got some free time to give me a coaching session? And it's become a really valuable community for me as well. And the thing with coaching is it's not focused on the past. It's not discussing in depth the past. Sometimes that will come up, but when you're coaching and asking questions, you don't need to know the background of what people have been through. You just need to know what emotions they're carrying and help them release those emotions and replace them with something more helpful. And it's totally empowering.
I think one of your strengths, Jennifer, in this life coaching is your empathy. It's not just theory for you. You've lived it.
Yes.
And that's reassuring for somebody that needs to know that whoever they're talking to does actually know what this is like. So you wrote this course, what was it, 8 Steps to Flourishing? Is that right?
Yes.
Okay.
So at the moment, it's currently for women whose husbands have got dementia. But over the next year, I'm actually going to take that and build it out as something wider, because really the 8 steps are suitable for most people, but definitely for people who are going through a tricky time. And do you know what the first one is? It's just learning to stop and breathe.
But we all breathe. What do you mean?
I was doing the hamster on the wheel breathing, the shallow breathing, the stress breathing. And I didn't know how to stop and take a deep breath and just connect to my body properly so that I could function.
So do you mean turning that into like a daily discipline?
Not so much daily, but when I'm feeling anxious, when I've got to make one of those phone calls I don't want to make, and there's a lot around my husband's dementia, a lot of advocacy work, just stopping and intentionally breathing and calming myself before I do something that might be a bit emotional or a bit challenging or a bit outside my comfort zone, and just learning how to do that. And it's powerful. I've taught my granddaughter, who she's just a big liver of life, a big liver of life. And I've taught her that when she's like having a bit of a meltdown, that she can stop and breathe, and we do it together. And I've been able to teach her, if there's something in her mind that is troubling her, something she's had a nightmare about or something, I've managed to teach her a technique to overcome that. And so it's all about, I've got so many techniques and tools in my toolbox now that, I can give to people, including my grandchildren, which is amazing, just to help them live a better life.
Which you wouldn't have been able to do had you not gone through these years. And I don't mean that to start saying, well, it all works out in the end, and there are positives to every negative. I don't mean that. What I do mean is that God doesn't waste anything that happens in our life. And there are some things I can never be because I have not been through what you've been through, but God hones me in other areas that I have been through.
Mm.
And that, well, again, a wonderful thing about the community is that amongst the people that we live with and love and are friends with, there's always someone who gets it, who can
Mm.
listen,
Mm.
and you know that they know. Now, your course that you said you have written, you've said that you want to take it wider, but can you don't just have to have a dementia in your life to be able to do this course to equip you to do life better. Could somebody who has got some other life debilitating condition in either themselves or in a loved one close by still pick up your course and apply it to them?
They could. It's very much written for where I was at the time, speaking to women who were going through their husbands got dementia. Anybody could do it. I tell some pretty difficult stories in that course, and that's why I do think I will rewrite it. But if anybody was really feeling like it could be particularly helpful for them, yes, they could, just with the knowledge that it was written by a woman whose husband had dementia at a time of grieving when I put my husband in care. So that's fairly well down the dementia journey. And to help other women. But the strategies, all the strategies I teach are actually really relevant for anybody. And that's why I do want to spend some time and rewrite it for a more general audience. It will be for women. That's just where my heart is at. I coach women. I don't coach men. I think we have very different ways of tapping into ourselves, men and women. And yeah, it will be for women. And yeah, but if anybody really felt it could be helpful, they could take it. It's an online course that you can just do in your own time whenever you want. And I kept it to 20 minutes, knowing that if you're looking after a husband with dementia, finding 20 minutes is all you've got. So they're 20-minute sessions on a whole.
How does somebody get in contact with you then, Jen? Either if they would like to pursue the 8-step one that you've written, or whether they would just like to talk to somebody who can ask them these strategic questions that you've mentioned to help them walk them through those next few very basic steps. How do they find you?
I think the easiest way at the moment, I don't have a website yet, is through email. So it's just jennifer@jenniferwatson.nz, and just to email me, and then I can hook them into whatever resources might be helpful. And I always offer a free 20-minute call to anybody who just wants to have a chat.
20 minutes is a very generous freebie. I will get that email from you and pop that in the description box below. Is there anything that we haven't talked about yet that you would like to say?
Let's see. You did have a question down. If this was to happen in a homeschool family, what would you suggest? Do you want to address that, or?
Yes, it's not too hypothetical for you?
No, because I had, again, a fairly couple of simple answers there.
Excellent.
So, yeah.
Good. Go for it.
Okay, so if something like this, I mean, this is dramatic. If something like this was to happen to a homeschool family, the first thing I'd say is just go live the best life and make memories and take photos, make photo books. Just the books aren't important. The bookwork's not important. Living life together is the most important thing. And obviously explain to children at an appropriate level what is going on, because we've got my 3 grandchildren living downstairs. They're now 11, 9 and 6. So this all started 5 years ago. So you can do the maths on that. Explaining to them at a level that's appropriate. Alzheimer's New Zealand does have very easy chapter book. I think it's called Luca and the Great Detective, that you can access for free if you're going through something like dementia. But yeah, for anything like this, that's, this is life limiting for us. So it's about making the memories and enjoying the time together and doing what you can do and take lots of photos. My grandson, it's hard. I often go and tuck him into bed at night, and he might be sitting there with a photo of him and his grandfather crying.
Oh,
yeah. He's found it very, very difficult because he was older and he was very special to my husband because we had girls. And now there was a boy in the house and he could buy Lego and do all those things with. So it's been very difficult for my grandson. I think also just say that a little bit, they might need to step up a little bit and help a little bit more. I think it's okay to do that, just to say, we're just going to need to change the way things are in the family now. And that might mean that we need a little bit more help with chores or spending more time with whoever it is, like getting the children to read to my husband. That kept him occupied, but he also enjoyed it. And there was a closeness there. Explore ways that the children can maybe take on a little bit more responsibility that would help. Because I have spent hours and hours and hours on the phone, hours and hours and hours on the phone, sorting stuff out. And so, a little bit of extra help goes a long, long way. Tap into advisors and things really early. Like, I didn't know about Dementia Wellington until way down track. I didn't actually know that they even existed. Yeah, huge gaps in the system. And that's why I do a lot of talking and promoting and advocacy for young onset dementia is, if somebody doesn't tell you about something, if you don't get the diagnosis and someone says, right, here's some practical steps you can take, you don't know what you don't know. But for most things, there is a group or, who will support, give advice, something like that around. Find it and tap into it and use it well. There is always a difficulty that I have had a couple of dementia advisors that have been unhelpful. So follow your gut. You know what's right for you and your family, and don't let anybody else tell you different. If something doesn't sit well with you, don't do it. Don't just, it's like when you have a newborn baby and everybody's got advice. I liken it to that. If it doesn't sit right for you, don't do it. Go find someone else who might be more a better fit for you.
Even if they are the expert.
Yeah.
Yeah. Because you're the expert on you and your family.
Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. I don't think there's anything else. I think they're the main things. Oh, I was given some advice. I did eventually tap into the Dementia Wellington. They have a series of 6 talks that they give about dementia. And one of the things that I was advised, which has been quite useful for me, was to think maybe where a line might be where you might consider that care is actually a better option than at home. And it's not a set in concrete, but if you've got a bit of a guideline, okay, this is where I would consider that, then if you're having a really bad day, you can go, okay, well, I'm not at what my bottom line was yet. I can still cope. I can get through this. This is just a bad day. And I actually found that really, really helpful. And then as we were approaching the time where I was going, okay, this is getting close to where my line was, is that still where I want to keep my line? Now, because we live multi-generationally and do have the grandchildren around a lot, I did need to keep that line. It was just what I needed to do. But it helped me actually get through some of the bad days because I could go, no, not there yet.
That is I've never heard that bit of advice before. That can be applied for a lot of things in life, can't it? Including like homeschooling, to come full circle back to it. You think you're having a really bad day, so you start thinking about sending them back to school again.
And And that's where the power of decisions. I've become really huge on decisions. Like it's a really important part of my coaching because making a decision is really, really powerful. It's when you're doing this blowing in the wind, will I, won't I, should I, shouldn't I? It's really disempowering.
And I imagine you would include those kinds of things in the question and the coaching that you would do.
Yes.
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 Thank you again. Thank you so much for your time. I so appreciate it. And yeah, if anybody needs to get in contact with you, I can only say, please do it. You won't regret it.
Thank you.
All right, my friend.
Dear.